What's up, everybody? What is going on? Welcome to another episode of Yammy Noob. This was actually a live stream that we did over on yammynoob.co on our Discord server. Make sure you join up as a member and you can join and hang out with me on these live streams, ask me questions, because today we are talking about Chinese motorcycles with the Discord boys. So let's see what they had to say, because we just put out our CF Moto full ride and review video on the CLX 700 Heritage model. So let's see what they had to say. Let's get into it. All it says, do you have a favorite Chinese bike? So for me, I've ridden a few of them. I've ridden the Benellis, the CF Motos now. I'd like to ride a QJ Motors one, but honestly, the CF is super nice. It was really, really good. I thought it was really well put together. I really liked it. But I will say, I think the Benelli, the Leoncino 500, was more fun. That was a more fun, peppy, interesting little motorcycle, even if the CF has a bigger motor and costs the same amount of money, just about. Boulay says, trying to see Chinese Super Sport. Now, that would be interesting. I don't think they'll come out with like a 600 class bike, but I bet you they'll come out with a sort of 1,000-ish cc super bike thing. That would be interesting. I think for a while, there was supposed to be one that was 1,200 cc's, a V4, something like that. Vega Hand says, does CF Moto have a 125cc to compete with the Grom and the Z125? CF Moto doesn't, but Benelli does, and we actually have one. Let's go take a look. But yeah, so this is kind of the Chinese mini bike option, the 125s. This is the TNT 135. We actually have one of these on loan from Benelli. As far as I know, this is kind of the main Chinese 125cc bike. Two Wheel says, Interceptor 650 or CF Moto 650, what would you spend your money on? I'd honestly buy the Royal Enfield. Mostly because, and I gotta keep the camera pointed on me because we have a special bike over here that the YouTube people can't know about, but you guys know about it. I would definitely do a Royal Enfield 650 over the CF Moto 650. Reason being, I know it's gonna sound cliche, but these bikes have a lot of nice character and pizzazz, and they feel really fun to ride. I understand now the Royal Enfield emozione. I don't know the word for emotion in Indian or Hindu, but I imagine I couldn't pronounce it anyways if I did. So they have a character, man, and the CF Moto just doesn't have that. It's a little milquetoast. It's very Z650 to me. Josh Johnson says, how easy is it to get CF Moto parts if we bought one? I bet you it wouldn't be that difficult. Mostly because CF Moto is a really big brand. They make a bunch of ATV stuff, and they already have a lot of dealerships doing their ATVs. So I bet you those same dealerships could service or get parts for the CF Moto. Let me put you guys down here with the little stick. There we go. So I bet it wouldn't be that hard, honestly. I know a lot of people worry about parts availability, and I would too, because especially coming from mainly buying Japanese and mainstream European bikes, you'd want to go to a dealership and be able to source the parts you want to source. Nothing worse than not having a bike you can service. It says, and in terms of CF Moto parts, for those worried, very easy to get here in Australia, so I presume it will be the same in America as they grow more. Yeah, I tend to agree. If they can service other markets, I mean, they have a huge headquarters and distribution center here in America, as far as I understand. So I'd have to imagine they'd be able to get you parts. So James says, XL700 versus Z650. If they're similar engines and gearbox, is the XL700 peppy for the price? Abs, the Z650 boring for the price while having the similar performance? So the CLX 700, I would rate it very similar to the Z650. What I liked about it, though, was the handlebars stock were wider. It had a little bit more charm side to side than a Z650, but very similar to a Z650. I personally wouldn't consider either bike super exciting or cool to ride. An MT-07 is still way more interesting to ride than both of the bikes. But I do think for CF Moto's first at bat, to be about as good as a Z650 is pretty awesome. Also, I kind of dock Kawasaki a little bit just because I expect more from them, man. I know that's kind of mean maybe to Kawi, but I feel like a company that's been making good motorcycles for the better part of 60 years or so, they should get a little bit something a little bit better than the Z650. You know what I'm saying? It's the same company that makes the ZX6, the ZX10, the H2s. I mean, come on. Boulet says, it's crazy to me to see the different opinion on CF Moto and Benelli in America because they sell pretty well here in Australia, especially the CF300 SR. Yeah, Americans, we have these kind of blinders sometimes with brands, and new brands especially that emerge. We're very reluctant to trust them or to look at them. But I know that the Chinese brands do extraordinarily well in Europe and in Australia and in other places too, except for India because they only buy Royal Enfields. They love supporting the home team, which totally fair. They're super cheap and they're pretty good bikes, so why wouldn't you? But yeah, I remember when I visited Europe in 2019, I was there a whole bunch, and in France, in Italy, in Spain, in London, and all these places I went, I saw a lot of Chinese bikes, honestly. Bikes that I didn't even know the name of at the time. Lex Moto and CF Moto, all these brands that I wasn't familiar with in 2019 that now I am as a more experienced motorcyclist, but they were everywhere, man. Those bikes are literally everywhere. And it's just really crazy to see that they are making their way here too. And I really don't, I think that in about 10 years, it won't be weird to just see them mingling with the Japanese bikes and people just accept them because they're cheap and good. That's all that matters at the end of the day. For most people, that's all that matters. They just want a good, cheap motorcycle. And CF Moto right now, they're giving it to you. Northern Tread says, Lex Moto makes a good 400. Yeah, Lex Moto, I hear so much about them in the European segment, but I don't think we have them here. I wish it wasn't so crazy difficult to get some of these oddball European bikes here in the States. I would love to do like a Yamaha R125. Those are crazy popular over there in Europe. The Lex Motos, just all these European brands and bikes that we don't get that are super popular, I think would be really cool, but to import them would be crazy. But maybe I could just fly over there and just try them all out and make a bunch of videos about them. That would be easy. I'm actually thinking about doing a little Yami Euro tour. That would be a lot of fun. Vega Hand says, so now that you are enjoying less common brands in the US, Royal Enfield and CF Moto, is there another brand you would like to ride, but you haven't yet? Let me think. What brand haven't I ridden yet? I've ridden almost all of them. I think I've ridden every single one of the mainstream big brands. Let's think of the little guys. You know, I want to try I do want to try a Janus for the memes. And I also want to try a, what's the CSC? Those like Chinese drop shipped bikes, or like they're just rebranded rando bikes that they import here to the States and sell them. The San Gabriels and those. So those are two that I'd like to try. That would be fun. So I think the Chinese bikes, honestly, I hate to say it, but they're pretty good. You know, the Chinese bikes are pretty good. I think a lot of people want to sit there and pretend like they're not really the right thing. And you know, one thing I hear a lot in the comments is that they don't want to support China because of their government and their practices and their intellectual property law stances. And that's a tough one. I was interested to see what you guys thought about that, because I do resonate with that to an extent. I do resonate with the sentiment that you don't want to support a regime like China. But at the same time, our economy is so globally tied, man. They are so, I mean, everything you touch has been through China, right? Like your iPhone, your computers, your furniture, the stuff you buy on Amazon, everything rolls through China. So I think the idea that you don't want to spend money on a Chinese bike to not support China is maybe a little silly, because you're already spending a bunch of money through China. Maybe you don't want to make a big purchase to support China, but a lot of those people that work on CF Moto live and work here in the States. So you're supporting American jobs too by buying those. So it's complicated, man. It's complicated when you just take this one-sided approach to global economics, right? Your sale of the CF Moto bike will probably go to support an engineer who lives here in Minneapolis who works on CF Moto stuff. They'll probably go for payroll for administrative people who live here in the States. So a little complicated to say. I don't know if I 100% agree with the stance. I kind of resonate with the sentiment that you don't want to support the Chinese regime, but you know. Magnamole says, do you see the engines lasting as long as the more well-known manufacturers? Personally, I do, because it appears that, especially for CF Moto, That engine looks exactly the same like a Z650. And I saw some comments saying that they already make those engines for Kawasaki, which I thought was crazy because Kawasaki is gigantic. I didn't know they needed anybody making engines for them, but maybe it's just cheaper for them to make it for them because that's what businesses do, right? And I think that time will tell. It's hard for me as a commonplace enthusiast to say that the engines will last much longer or better or the same as Japanese engines because those are proven reliable over the past 3-4 decades. It's going to take some time for us to see what the CF Moto engines do. But I think since the basis appears to be like a Z650, it's probably going to be pretty good, I hope. Sam says, the CF Moto USA in Minneapolis was wondering why Josh and Whitney were in my city. Yes, apparently their U.S. headquarters or some sort of office is in Minneapolis. James says, do you think the additional features on the Chinese bikes will push the industry leaders forward to have those features as well for their similar class bikes? I hope so, especially cruise control. I feel like it's crazy that they've got a bike that costs $6,500 with cruise control. There's no Japanese bike that has that. There's no European bike that has that. And it's such a nice feature. It's such a nice feature, and it's great that it's starting to trickle down, and they've got it in such a nice way that you can just flip the switch, set the cruise, go. Works really, really well. Total no-brainer. Really hope to see that in Japanese bikes. I can do without the fancy screens. The smaller displacement CF Motos have the crazy big screens and stuff, but I honestly think that it's not really necessary. The background is still the same. We're now hanging out with Marc Marquez and Fabio at Malaysia, where Mark made the pass, and he won. Oh, Ryan asks, what's that sign behind you? Let me go show you. The sign is an old poster that I had from like 2016. It's just a tiny little poster that just says, work hard, make cool shit. That's it. Jesse says, I bought a CF Moto 700 CLX Sport in June. Love the bike as a first bike ever. Definitely makes me want a different style of bike to go along with it. I just want to ride more and more bikes. Yeah, that'll definitely happen to you as you enter your riding journey. You'll want to ride all the different bikes all the time, and who can blame you? Every motorcycle is a ton of fun, basically. It's pretty hard to find a bike that isn't a ton of fun. They're all fun in their own ways. I often say this, motorcycles are like dogs. They're all good boys in their own ways, and you can't hate any of them, really. Except a few. There's a few you can't hate. Jesse says, Yam, I know you have a CF Moto Heritage in the shop, but did you ever ride the sport model with Clip-Ons and Brembos? I did not. However, Josh wrote it, Whitney wrote it, and Brandon from Revzilla wrote it, and I got their feedback from it, and the consensus was that the Heritage was a little bit better, mostly because the brakes seem to not be so grabby. It seems like the CF Moto Sport was over-braked for what it was with the Brembos and the dual discs. That's what I heard. And the riding position on the Heritage seemed to be a little bit more neutral as well. But, yeah, I haven't ridden it. But I hear they're very similar other than the wheel tire and the bars and stuff, but pretty good. DK says, what's your impression of the CF Moto Adventure bike? I think it's more of a sport touring thing. I don't really know if it's as much of an adventure bike, more of a long-distance sport touring bike that has knobbies on it, which, no shade, that's totally fine, you know? But, yeah, I think it could have been a little more adventure-y for my taste, but, yeah. Jesse says, oh yeah, they do grab, but I definitely felt more secure and stable. I rode both before the purchase, and the Sport CLX was just better for me. Besides, I need upgraded seat cushions, but might be because I'm a fatty. Sorry to hear that. Yeah, I would really like to do like a total back-to-back on the CF Moto Sport versus the Heritage. That would be a pretty cool video too. I feel like the Heritage video is pretty in-depth. We try to do the most comprehensive job possible on that one. So I don't know if y'all remember, at the old office, we used to sit there at the Yamcast and kind of look out the window. Sort of same situation here. I'm just sitting here, and I can just watch people go back and forth. There's much more normal people here than at the old office, which is good. But there is still a CrossFit gym. There's still a CrossFit gym. They don't seem to run in the parking lot, which is good. They seem to contain their CrossFit shenanigans to inside of a building. So these people are a little more evolved than the other CrossFit goblins that existed at the old office. But CrossFit people what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do with the friggin' CrossFit people? Alrighty, everybody. Thanks for joining the Yam Cam. I appreciate you guys. Love you guys. I'll see you in the Discord.
Keep watching Yam News.